Now, in process costing, where equivalent units under the FIFO method is concerned, the FIFO method, which is the first in, first out method, assumes that the units completed are transferred out from the earliest work in process inventory. Right? Also, for FIFO, equivalent units are calculated separately for the units started and completed during the period. So we are separating that calculation. We also focus on allocating the cost to units completed and transferred out first, followed by cost for partially completed units. It also considers the cost of units started first as being transferred out, leading to a difference in cost allocations when they compare to other methods. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. On the left, we can see we have our physical units. This is for the assembly department. And under our units to be accounted for, the physical units, it includes the opening work in process, which is 40% complete. Right? The physical units there associated with that is 500 units. The started or the units transferred into production during the period is 8,000. So total units to be accounted for in the period is 8,500 units. Now, out of that 8,500 units, we have completed and transferred out 8,100. And the work in process at the end of that period, with goods which is 75% complete, is 400. We could see that both these are balancing at 8,500 units each. Now, using the equivalent units FIFO method, our work in process on the 1st of June, although we have 500 physical units, that came in at 40% complete. So the work that was done during the period on this work in process was 60% in order to complete it. So we find in 60% of that 500. So the equivalent units of work in process under this method will be 300 units. And then we remember we have a closing work in process of 400 units. And if we said we started 8,000 units in production during the period and our closing is 400, it means that those that was started and fully completed was 7,600 units. And that's 100% complete in terms of equivalent units, so we will check that as 7,600. On our work in process, we have 400 units based on the physical units given, but that's only 75% complete. So the equivalent units, if you find 75% of that, is going to be 300. So in terms of equivalent units, we have 8,200 equivalent units. Now, what you need to bear in mind is that the equivalent units that we are looking at here, right, is the total work performed on one, the completed units of opening work in process, right? So we're talking about that 60% of that 500 units. Two, the completed units started into production within a period, right? Which will be the 7,600 units. These are the units that have been started and not just started, but started and completed. We got that 7,600 units by subtracting our closing work in process from the goods that were started, the units that were started into production, 8,000. So 8,000 minus 400 is giving us the 7,600. And then finally, the other thing that's making up our equivalent units for the period is the partially completed units, which is our ending work in process inventory. And that's 75% complete, right? So 75% of our 400 is giving us 300. The sum of these equivalent units works out to be 8,200. All right, so here we have a fully worked example. We have on our left the assembly department's production report, so to say, with our units and our cost information. Our opening work in process at the beginning of the month is 100,000 units, and that's 100% complete with respect to direct materials. The conversion cost is 70% complete. During the period started into production, the units completed and transferred out was 700,000, right? Now you have to understand that there's an element of work in process inside of here, right? And we need to take that out, and you'll see it when we do our solution. The work in process at the end of the month, at the end of June, is 200,000. So that is 100% complete with respect to direct materials and 60% complete in terms of conversion cost. This is enough information for us to do the first two steps in our reconciliation sheet. So let's go look at the reconciliation sheet on the right. Now you'd see that I have under the physical units column is our step one. So we list in Two sets of things inside of there. We want to look at the units to be accounted for and the units accounted for. So under units to be accounted for, basically we take in all the units in our working process at the start and the total goods that were started into production. So that's 100 units at the beginning. That was the working process at the beginning, our starting working process. And then we started into production 800 units. So in total, that's 900 units that we have to, that has to be accounted for, so to say. Now, in the physical units for units accounted for, right, there was 100 units at the start. That's our opening working process. Now, our closing working process is 200,000 units. And they said, according to our units information here, that the units started into production during June is 800. So if we started into production 800 and we had a closing working process of 200, that means that the units started and completed would be 600 units. That's how we get that 600 units here. And well, we know the 200 is our ending working process. So 100 plus 600 plus 200 is equivalent to those 900 units that need to be accounted for. And that concludes step one. Now, step two is our equivalent units part. Now, remember with our FIFO method, we said we are using equivalent units for the total work performed on the completed units of opening working process. That's the difference from the weighted average method. Also, the completed units started into production, which will be 100% complete, as well as the partially completed units in our ending working process inventory. So let's go do that. So with materials, it's 100% complete, right? And that was 100% complete from the get-go. So we have a zero there under the materials column for our opening working process. Our conversion cost for the working process is the extra work that we had to do to complete that working process in this period. And that's it was 70% complete at the start. So we're talking about 30% was the work that was added, right? So 30% of 100 units is giving us 30,000. That's why we have that figure of 30,000 there. Now, going back now to the started and completed, well, they started and completed, so there's 100% in terms of material. So we could put 600 there. Similarly, for work in process, closing work in process, that's 100% complete. So that's 200,000 units there as well on the materials. So the materials, we are 100% complete. Conversion now started and completed would also be 100% complete because why? It's started and completed. But our work in process, it says it's 60% complete. So 60% of that 200,000 units in work in process is going to give us 120,000. So our equivalent units where materials is concerned is 800,000, and our equivalent units where conversion cost is concerned is 750,000. Right? So we completed with step two. We need this information because we then need to apply this in our next section, which is step three, where we are looking at the unit cost. We need to calculate unit costs in order to use in our cost to be accounted for and cost accounted for section. So let's take a look at our unit costs. So the total material cost, right? This is the cost in June, excluding the beginning working process, right? Because remember, we're only looking at what happened in June for the first in, first out, right? Will be 400,000. In the previous method we did, which was the AFCO, we would have actually included the direct materials at the start of June, right? But that didn't happen this year. What happened this year was $400,000. So my material in June, and excluding the beginning working process, is 400,000, right? In terms of our conversion cost, though, our conversion cost is going to be 170. I am excluding what happened at the beginning working process. So my total cost is 570,000. Now for the materials, I'm going to divide that 400,000 by my 800,000 equivalent units to give me 50 cents per unit. And for my conversion cost, I am taking $170,000, which was the conversion cost incurred during production in June, and I'm dividing that by the 750,000 equivalent units. That's going to give me 0.227. We add these two together to get our total costs, and then we go on to our next section, which is our cost to be accounted for. So the work in process on June 1st, right? The total work in process in June 1st, it was given as 85,000. So I didn't need to use my equivalent units to do that. We record that at 85,000. Started into production, right, would have been the 400,000 direct materials and the 170,000 conversion cost. So that's 570,000. So the total cost to be accounted for is 655 or 655,000, right? So we get that information from our cost side of our production report. Now we're going to do our step 4, which is our cost reconciliation. We want to show that the goods that was transferred out and what remain balances back with our cost, right? So costs are accounted for now. We have transferred out, right? Work in process 85,000. We know where we got that from. Our conversion cost is what's happening in this period is 30,000 equivalent units, right? 30,000 equivalent units by our unit cost for conversion cost 0.227, right? That's going to give us 6,810, right? We could add that up. That's going to give us 91,810. So our unit started and completed is going to be 600,000. We saw that as our started and completed units by the total unit cost, which is 0.727. That's 435,950, right? Then we have our material cost, which is 200,000 units, right? We got that from our section up here. Full material by 50 cents, that's 100,000. And then our 120 units by 0.227, right? We multiply that, that's going to give us 27,240. And the sum of those two things is 127,240, right? If we add those two figures together, part of the screen is missing, but if we add 527,760 to 127,240, you could add that up for me right now. You will see that we will balance. Our final cost is going to match back or reconcile with our total cost of 655,000. And this basically covers how we do our production report using the FIFO method. Thank you.